Scandals spreading throughout Washington, D.C. this year, from the buzz on Benghazi to the IRS targeting conservatives, but call for the president's opinion on these incidents, and he says that these are phony scandals. Our next guest was a target of one of these so-called phony scandals, being forced to abandon her local Tea Party group in the wake of IRS demands on conservatives. Jennifer Stefano is the Pennsylvania State Director of Americans for Prosperity and a Tea Party activist. Jennifer, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Again. Tell us your experience when you tried to set up a Tea Party chapter in your town.
Right. It just became very, again, I was a pregnant stay-at-home mother, and I remember speaking to the IRS, and they were asking for very personal information, your personal Facebook page, list of donors, and prayers you might have said at meetings. And this is what shut it down for me. I said, well, what if I don't turn this in? And they followed up and said, well, it could be considered perjury, and then you can be jail time for perjury. And I thought, this is crazy. And we all had the sense that this was because we were the political opposition of President Obama. If we were liberal, we knew this wouldn't have happened. And I had to shut it. And this happened to people across the country. We lost a lot of money.
So you thought that you were going to be doing a grassroots endeavor to sort of express your political leanings, and you were threatened with jail time.
Right, and so basically calling up, and other organizations were getting these letters and warning me that this was happening. So I'm starting, and this was long before I've ever heard of groups like Americans for Prosperity, I'm starting to file my paperwork, and I get an agent on the phone going through this list of questions, and I just happened to ask, well, what happens if I don't turn this in? And that's when they said, could be considered perjury. You could have jail time with that. Very unhelpful and a really bad experience. And
so this week, when you heard President Obama 3 times use the expression, these phony scandals that Republicans are focused on and that Washington, D.C. is caught up in, what did you think?
Yeah, well, I thought 2 things. First, while what happened to me and other activists was bad, I think the parents of the people who died in Benghazi, who had to greet their children coming home in coffins, it's just untoward. I cannot believe a sitting president would refer to it like that, because these are human beings that lost children, family members, loved ones. So my heart really went out to them. And the second one is, maybe the president's referring to his own phony scandal of the sequestration. You'll remember a couple months ago, the president was claiming the sky was going to fall. His chief of staff called the sequestration a disastrous list of horribles, including starving children and pregnant women without food, and the mentally ill not getting services and dangerous work sites, none of which happened. The sequestration has been very hard because the president, instead of doing the appropriate cuts that wouldn't affect people, really made it affect employees, so people felt it. But for the vast majority of Americans, the things it said that were going to happen didn't. The sky didn't fall. The government still runs. There are not bridges and everything collapsing onto the country.
Right. So there hasn't been a plague of locusts.
Right, like
exactly.
locusts, river
and of course, it's impossible to know what the president is talking about because he hasn't specified which of these scandals are phony. But Jennifer Stefano, great to see you. Thanks so much for telling us your personal story with this.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks for having me.